secret of laughter lies in the laughing, not in the search for joy. It's a swallow winging on the wind, it's innocence in a boy. Lurulurulero, lurulurulai. Joy will come to anyone whose heart has learned to fly. Lurulurulero, lurulurulai. Joy will come to anyone whose heart has learned to fly. Joy in the singing, not in the song sung, welcome but never crave. If you think that laughter lies in things, to things you'll be but a slave. Lurulurulero, lurulurulai. Joy will come to anyone whose heart has learned to fly. Lurulurulero, lurulurulai. Joy will come to anyone whose heart has learned to fly. Joy in the giving, not in the gaining, grasp and you'll never sing. You could win the world and still be poor in peace and live like a king. Lurulurulero, lurulurulai. Joy will come to anyone whose heart has learned to fly. Lurulurulero, lurulurulai. Joy will come to anyone whose heart has learned to fly. Sing when the sun shines, sing when the rain falls, sing when your road seems strange. In a tempest seize the lightning flash and ride the winds of change. Lurulurulero, lurulurulai. Joy will come to anyone whose heart has learned to fly. Lurulurulero, lurulurulai. Joy will come to anyone whose heart has learned to fly. Lurulurulero, lurulurulai. Joy will come to
it's been it's been a wonderful week. We're about halfway through, and the energy is still building. So today we have another talk with a distinguished panel here, and we started the week with bringing down the vision of the masters and how that was manifested in practicality in communities here at Ananda Village, and then yesterday we talked about moving that out into the world. Well, our masters also had another part of their mission. They were avatars for a new age, and they were ushering in Dwapara Yuga. So we've been focusing so far pretty much on self-realization and on the individual search for God. But there was a whole other part to that mission that Master brought and Swami brought, and that was laying the groundwork for a elevation of consciousness in a new age as we move into an age of energy, of Dwapara Yuga, of how to bring these principles into many aspects of life. And today, each of our panelists is going to speak to one small aspect that Swami and Master spoke about and that they've been working in that area. So we're going to start with Kshama, who'll speak about education. David will speak about music. Sundara will speak about our relationships in nature. Dharmarajan will speak about East meets West and adaptations of these teachings to different cultures. Zach will speak about simple living and high thinking. And Dr. Michelle will talk about health and healing. And my name is Atman. I will be speaking about communities when we finish. So.
Good morning. My name is Kshama, and as I came up this morning and I looked around, I just had this overwhelming sense of gratitude for Swami Kriyananda, for all of you, and looking out, I can see I had the incredible gift of being a child in this community and being raised by this community, and I see many of you who supported me and have supported me all through the years, so thank you for that. My family was given the autobiography of a yogi when I was in utero, and by the time I was 2, my family was here. I attended the original Living Wisdom School here on this property, and now I have the privilege of teaching in our school in Palo Alto and supporting the elementary, middle, and high school program there. I want to give you just a little bit of a background, a little bit more than's been shared about what's happening with Education for Life, and then I hope to share a little bit with you about what Education for Life is, and in the time that we have, it will be just a sliver of the depth and breadth of what this expression of Raja Yoga looks like, but I hope it gives you a taste and leaves you wanting more. So we were reflecting the other day that the first Living Wisdom School, I believe it was called a How to Live School, was founded here at Ananda Village in the early 1970s. Swami commissioned Nitai to begin this movement. But if we actually look farther back, the movement began over 100 years ago. In 1917, Paramhansa Yogananda, Master, started a school based on the principles of Raja Yoga in India, and we're carrying that torch forward in many ways. Today, we have a huge 45 more years of experience of really a living laboratory of education and Raja Yoga in action through these principles and these schools and all of the manifestations that it's taken. There are schools in the United States, schools in Europe. There's been exploration of what that expression can look like in places like India and Latin America. It's spreading in some ways like wildfire, and in some ways it feels like a crawl. We have teacher training programs that are year-long or 2-year-long intensives in some of our schools. We have online trainings that are reaching hundreds and hundreds of teachers around the globe and being taught in many, many different languages. I know that I can't actually stand here and tell you all of the expressions it's taking because so many people have picked up the torch and are carrying it forward. It's impossible for me to say every way that it's spreading. I was just reading in the beautiful book that all of us received that there's now a gap year opportunity being offered through Ananda University. So it's really, really incredible. We're also exploring ways of using internet and all these technologies to offer online both trainings and education experiences for high schoolers, for college students. So there's a lot going on. It is very exciting. I was thinking about how to sort of encapsulate what this shift is as I see it, as we move into Dwapara Yuga and we start talking about what education really can be. And recently our high school in Palo Alto participated in an international conference on climate change and consciousness. And in preparation for that, we were drawing in and learning from as many different wisdom teachers from around the world as we could. And I came across a shaman from Latin America, South America, and he was talking about this topic of climate change, but he said, I get asked this question all the time, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? And he said, that's actually the second question. He said, the first question is, who can you be? Because who you can be will determine what you can do. And so, while the forms of education are changing, and we see a lot of incredible transformation in public school systems, in many different radical movements, I think the key element in what we're trying to do in Education for Life is address that first question, who can you be? Change from the inside, because that will completely determine what we can do on the outside. I was talking with one of our recent graduates, and he was reflecting on exactly the same thing. He's gone on not to the high school in Palo Alto, but to another local high school, very innovative place. He's quite happy in a lot of ways, but he was sharing that dynamic is completely reversed again for him. And he's now in an environment where it is not about who he can be. It's about what he can do, what he can bring for the school, what he can do for himself. And we're all backwards. We really, educationally, societally, we have to make this turnaround shift and stop thinking in terms of what can I do, what can I get? Who can we be? How do we change here so that the outside, the expression shifts? We do a lot of work with our students to help them get in touch with who they are. And sometimes it takes the form of meditation, and sometimes it takes the form of conflict resolution skills, and sometimes it takes the form of creative problem solving, learning how to use intuition to perceive the solution, the answer, the creative way of moving forward. But it always begins with the self. I want to tell you a sequence of 3 little stories, and they take us from what's in it for me. Well, they actually take us from no to what's in it for me, and then how can I use what I have to share. And these are stories from very young children, but if you listen for the center point of each story, it holds true for all of us. So the first story is a little boy who just joined our school, very small kindergarten student. First day of school, teacher brings all the children into circle, and they're learning how to be together, and we do a lot of breath work. pranayama from a very young age. How do we breathe so that we can be centered and happy? And she was teaching star breath. Big star, lots of glitter and sparkles. Every time the star goes up, you breathe in. Every time the star goes down, you breathe out. And he looks around. And he looks at the teacher and he says, I didn't have to breathe in my last school. And then he says, and I'm not breathing here. How many times do we go through life with that attitude? Another little girl. She's in circle. Was in my class many years ago. And we do a meditation called Happy Thoughts. And we simply get quiet and we think of something that brings us joy. And then we have an opportunity to share what that is. So it came to her, and she said, well, my happy thought is breathing. And I thought, that's interesting. Okay. And then she looked at me and she said, do you want to know why? I said, yeah. And she said, it's because this morning I couldn't find my backpack and we were late and my mom was really upset. And then I remembered that I could take a deep breath and everything would be okay. We learn how to use these tools, these practices for ourselves, and they make a huge difference, don't they? And the next story is taking it farther into service to others. And this was on the playground, older students, big game of basketball happening. And on our playground, if any of you have ever visited this particular campus, it's not expansive in terms of space, not like the Village campus here. But because of that, we have a lot of opportunities to create deep community connection because we're always together. And so you'll often see basketball being played this way and soccer being played this way and tricycles winding their way through this way. And there's a lot of grace on the playground usually. We do just fine. But on this particular day, a basketball went astray and took out one of the children right in the face. And the child went down. And I saw this. I was across the playground, so I started walking across very slowly because sometimes you just never know what will happen. Sometimes they bounce right up. Sometimes something else happens. So I looked, and right there, all of the children had gathered, and there was a little boy on the ground right next to him. And he was saying, I kind of peered in to see what was going on. I could see all the kids seemed to be in sync with each other. And he was saying, look at me. I don't see any blood. You're going to be fine. Just breathe. And the circle of kids, probably 15 of them, were all breathing in harmony with each other, in sync. And then he finally got up and everything was fine. But we need an educational system that teaches us all of these ways of being, how to go from that no into that space of how does it help me, so that we have that personal experience of the benefit of what we're doing, and then how do we share it, how do we spread it out so that it touches many, many more souls. We need education that goes, instead of from what can I do, to who can I be. I would encourage all of you, if you have the opportunity to study education for life, it is not only for people who work with or interface with small children or young adults. It's for all of us because it speaks of Raja Yoga. It speaks of the transformation of consciousness, of working with energy, of how we transform. And it offers another way of understanding it and very, very practical tools to working with ourselves, working with our family, working with our coworkers, working with the next wave, the next generation that will be caring for this planet. So if you have the opportunity, learn, visit a school, explore ways that you can bring this into your homes wherever you are. Enjoy some of the online opportunities that are available, and let's see what the next expressions begin to look like, whether it's, as was mentioned, as possibilities, homes for children in need in many parts of the world, whether it's new schools, whether it's family programs or adventure programs, whatever it might be. Let's find ways of being what we need and what this world needs. Thank you.
I'm David Eby. I serve as choir director at Ananda Portland. On a rainy, cold night in 1997, I sat in my car drenched in misery. I had just come out of a 3-hour orchestra pit rehearsal, suffering under an uninspired, miserable conductor. My joy of music was squashed, left only with an emptiness that many musicians come to know. I had only been meditating for a few weeks, and I knew that this misery was not what I was looking for. And so my mind reached out to my new friends at Ananda Portland, and I had just joined the choir a few weeks ago, and I thought I was going to be the game changer for them with all of my musical experience and skills. Little did I know that the music was going to be a life changer for me. So they asked me to sing a solo in our upcoming performance of Swami Kriyananda's oratorio, Christ Lives, and I thought, I better practice it so I don't make a fool of myself. So there I sat in my car, miserable, and I started to sing, "This is my son, in whom I am well pleased." And by the time I finished that short 40-second song, my consciousness had changed completely. My misery was gone, replaced with an energy of joy vibrating at my spiritual eye that just a few weeks ago I didn't even know existed. And there in that moment started a lifelong quest to understand the mystery of music and consciousness. So just like my friend Dana Anderson, who has founded the Academy for Art, Creativity, and Consciousness, I've been studying and sharing through concert meditations, through workshops for schools and colleges and choirs and orchestras and corporations, how we can use music and meditation to heal ourselves, to raise consciousness, and to tap into inspiration. I'm not the only one doing this, however. Out at Princeton University, they've also been doing concert meditations that perhaps some of you have seen covered by the New York Times. This is starting to raise awareness about what we can do when we combine this chocolate and peanut butter together as we go. The Cleveland Orchestra is working with school systems to bring in their recordings with meditations in the morning to de-stress the students, to take them out of their stressful lives and allow their day to start grounded, centered, and peaceful, and they're having great success. I've just been asked by the Oregon Symphony to see if we can't come up with something to partner with their school systems as well to bring in music with their musical programs. But today is a really important day. Not only is it the official anniversary of Ananda, the official 50th But tonight, we bring together for the first time ever over 130 singers, all arranged here for this evening's concert. Yesterday in rehearsal, it was overwhelming, so be warned. It is going to be an incredibly powerful experience, singing with this many souls in this amazing temple and acoustic. Singing in this, I didn't touch it. The battery must have gone, there it is, we're on. 130 singers in this amazing acoustic. There we go. So this next thing that we're going to do is also for the first time ever. We are going to ask probably over 1,000 people to sing with consciousness all together. So we've got all of you assembled. We've got people overflowing. We have people online to find out what can happen if we sing for 20 seconds together with a deeply inspired piece by Swami Kriyananda. Now, there's two important things that Swami Kriyananda writes in The Art and Science of Raja Yoga, and it's easy to miss because he doesn't spend a whole lot of time. It's in the step 8 of affirmations, part 2, and it's talking about how music captures sympathetically feeling and thought. What does that mean, captures sympathetically? Swami Kriyananda is talking about how this phenomenon of sympathetic resonance is alive and is actually the secret of Ananda. I'm going to demonstrate on my cello here. So we'll ask the cameras to zoom in for a minute. So sympathetic resonance is a phenomenon where a pitch will start to resonate when its pitch is sounded nearby. So here I have my D string, sounds like that, and then I'm going to play another D on my instrument. And along with this is attunement. If I don't play the right note, it's not going to work. So I hope I can get to that in a little bit. So when I play this note down here, this D string will start to vibrate on its own. I'm not touching it, I'm not moving it, there's no secret compartment in the cello to start it going. It just happens. Science does not know how to explain it. They can't call it a theory or even a law, but it's the truth. It simply is. And we talk about this all the time. I resonate with that. That struck a chord in me. We're on the same wavelength. I'm in tune with that. It touched me. It moved me. We talk about something that's happening within us that we don't know how to yet measure, but we know is there. So music somehow, and this is the great mystery yet, somehow captures these thoughts and feelings. And Swami Kriyananda writes, I can best express through music the state of holy upliftment that possessed me. He writes, if you want to get to know me, listen to my music. And I'll take it a step further. If you want to taste his consciousness, to taste what he called this new ray of consciousness that has come through his music, sing it. Sing it. And we're going to do that in just a minute. Now, the second thing is this. He goes on to say that music, just like architecture, it gets infused with the vibrations with which it is sung. So just like this will become not only the amazing place that it is now, but in another 50 years, it's going to be buzzing with vibration of all the years and all the devotion. I've played in rock bands and been in some places where the vibration has not been so nice, and I've wanted to run screaming as quickly as I could. But here we are blessed. When you go on pilgrimage, you go into these places. So it is possible to go on pilgrimage with the music of Ananda. You go on a pilgrimage of consciousness. So the thing that I realized in meditation today is that out of all the music that has existed in this yuga, Ananda music is the first to be cultivated and impregnated by Kriya yogis. Here we have this music that we are consciously drawing in. We are aware through our meditation of how music affects us. And then we are consciously sharing with the tools that we know. We are consciously sharing this with the world. I can't say that Ananda music is changing the world yet. It's not on all the stations on the radio yet. But imagine in 250 years when somebody picks up this music. And this music is such a fascinating thing. It is a roadmap. It is code. It is source code. That if I take this music and I play it sensitively, and I tune in and play it accurately, with as much receptivity as possible, I will get a response from God. Yogananda has spiritualized all of the cosmic chants. He has sung them until he got a divine response from God. And that's why this music is so important for us as devotees, because it allows us to tap directly into that state of consciousness. So before we sing, I'd like you to all raise your right hand. I solemnly swear to sing out with all my heart. I will not judge my own voice, nor the voices of those around us. And I will feel safe. So help me God. So now what I'd like you to do is to take a look around at this gorgeous dome. Because what we're going to do is we're going to build a temple of light within us. We're going to build space within us for something to resonate. What is that something? I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to feel after I sing this next 20 seconds, but I know from experience it's going to be something good. It can be a feeling, it can be an energy, it can be a spark, it can be something, it can be a thought. But whatever it is, it's genuine. And that's the secret of our Ananda music, is that we express the genuine, sincere vibration of what comes to us. Rather, in classical music, we just play and we think, oh, we've got to play this, and we think how we superimpose our thoughts. But this is music that we get to impose, we get to infuse with our genuine experience. So close your eyes for just a moment, and with these next 4 breaths, I want you to create space within, starting at your heart, using these few breaths to relax, to expand from the inside out, and to prepare to perceive. So we'll have a slide with the words of Lord Most High that you can use here if you need. And we'll just sing it through just the first verse. Lord Most High, our Heavenly Father, all our lives we dedicate to Thee. All our labors, all our joys and woes, all our pleasure, all our melody. And then close your eyes again and bring your awareness within, feeling for any change of consciousness. And with each breath, allow this to resonate ever more completely. And now feel for the resonance of not only your energy, but those around you, filling this holy site, infusing its walls with vibration. And I'll close by inviting you, after you leave here this Holy Week, to build that inner resonance within you. Just as my D string resonated from a source that was outside of itself, we too, through attunement, can tap into an energy, can tap into a consciousness that allows us to access that state of feeling. Reason follows feeling. Willpower will follow naturally. So by perceiving resonance within, we can change the world. We can change ourselves. Om.
Hello, Ananda family. I would like to first, on this 4th of July, honor the founding fathers and mothers of Ananda Village. Because the country that we live in is blessed by those who have come before us. And maybe even today, starting from July 4th, from the years onward, we should have a celebration. where we do a parade of our fathers and mothers. So thank you very much. My name is Sundara, and I've been living here at Ananda Village for the past 12 years. Moving here shortly after graduating from college, I serve at the Crystal Hermitage Gardens, do a bit of teaching at the Expanding Light, and work with Sharing Nature Worldwide, leading nature awareness trainings. In 1979, Nayaswami Dharmarajan, or how he is known famously throughout the world, Joseph Cornell, wrote this book, Sharing Nature with Children, a book that would very quickly spread around the world. To date, there are 68 editions of all of Bharat's books published in 28 languages. 40,000 people in Japan alone have taken our 3-day training. And recently, Sharing Nature was ranked as one of the 15 most influential books since 1890 for connecting people of all ages to nature. Yes. Literally millions of people have been touched by the Sharing Nature experiences that Bharat has created. All of it has been inspired by Master's teachings. For what Bharat has done is he's created a universal way of expressing these teachings so that a broad spectrum of people could experience the joy of their own souls. And when we think of, we always have to meet people where they are and then help them go step by step to something higher. When we think of meditation, a lot of people in the world, they practice meditation for stress reduction, don't they? But in its highest expression, it's about God realization. And so it is with Sharing Nature. Many people will say, these are some of the best nature awareness activities around for bringing my students to nature and to teach ecology in a creative way. There was one teacher who said, what I love about Sharing Nature is that my students are learning, but they don't even know it. But in its highest expression, Sharing Nature is about helping people realize their harmony and oneness with all of life. I was in China a few years ago, leading a 5-day training, and at the end of the training, we were doing a very powerful Sharing Nature exercise. It's called I Am the Mountain. And in this exercise, you're trying to feel your consciousness in all of creation. And there was a boy, about a young man, 22 years old, and he just said with these tears streaming down his face, I did not just feel the sun's warmth, I became the sun. And he was so moved. And so what Bharat has done is, and this is something that even if you're not familiar with flow learning, you know it, and you'll see why. And what Bharat has done is he's created a system of starting with people where they are and guiding them step by step to higher consciousness. And he called the system flow learning. And flow learning begins by awakening enthusiasm. And so we do activities where we bring people together in joy and laughter and teach natural history in a fun way. But you know what's really happening? People are becoming energized. And then the next stage, we focus people's attention. People might be sitting quietly, creating a map of the sounds around them. And people would say, these are some of the best activities for honing our observational skills. And they are. But you know what's really happening? People are learning to become calm and deeply concentrated. And then the next stage is offer direct experience. And in this stage, people are becoming deeply immersed as they embrace a tree, or they, again, feel their consciousness in the plants around them, in the trees, and in the sky above. And you know what's really happening? As they embrace that tree, Divine Mother is embracing them. As they tune in more, not to the tree, but to Divine Mother's presence in all of creation. As John Muir said, there are thousands of windows to reveal God. And as Davey said the other day, we just have to be open enough to be able to receive. And then lastly, we take the experience we had and then we try and share it so that everyone can benefit. So very simply, in these 4 stages, we know what Bharat has done. It mirrors our meditation routine we do every morning. So when we have people in Germany, Syrian refugees, practicing these activities with German children as a way of integrating them together, they're practicing the techniques and the vibrations of our masters. And it's powerful. I've led these trainings now in 13 countries, and I'm always amazed to see the simplicity of them, but the power that they have to change people's consciousness. I want to read a story of an experience a lady wrote to us a few years ago from Japan. She's now in her 40s, and this is something that she shared with us of an experience she had with sharing nature when she was about 12 years old. She writes, "I had a very troubled past. My peers and many adults avoided me. I believed my life was not worth living. My parents, always critical of me, pressured me to excel at everything that I did. They told me often that I wasn't good enough to live. Fortunately, I began attending the Sharing Nature trainings in Tokyo, outings where I felt accepted by and comfortable with other children. Still, I continued to feel troubled inside. No one could have planned for the healing that Sumi received one day in the forest. After throwing leaves playfully at one another, the leader asked the children, 'Would you like to be buried in leaves?' Playing earth windows is a sharing nature activity, changes one's perspective dramatically. Lying perfectly still under a thick blanket of leaves, looking up from the earth, gazing at the swaying trees and passing clouds, connects us with the earth and the sky. 3 decades later, Sumi shared her experience of being enveloped by a forest of leaves. And this is what she said. Inside the leaf pile, I was safe, I was warm, and I was comfortable. I felt a part of the rich earth. I knew that the leaves and insects accepted me. The world is so beautiful. Never before had I held it in such radiance and benevolence. Every sound became precious to me and uplifted me long after my original experience. For the very first time, I felt that my life was a precious gift. And these are experiences that we often see time and time again. And it was so touching because this past springtime at Ananda with our 17,000 tulips, this Japanese woman was there with her little son. And she's a radiant woman now. Swami Kriyananda said that if Master would have done nature education, this is how he would have done it. And I thought, well, of course, you have to work with energy because we're in Dwapar Yuga to lift people's consciousness. But I think he meant something more than that when he said this is how he would have done it. This is how, because it's how Bharat did it. Bharat was in his 20s when he wrote Sharing Nature. And at that time, it wasn't about him expressing himself. It was only about doing the will of God. And for all of us coming now who are here and those coming the next 50 years, there's going to be many more expressions of Master's teachings. And the way that the difference between just regular creativity and superconscious creativity is mere creativity can inspire, of course, and bring goodness into this world, but superconscious creativity, coming from a supercharged spine of love for God, uplifts people's consciousness and fulfills Master's mission. I want to share this quote in honor of Bharat, the founding father, one of the founding fathers of Ananda. And I think this quote really exemplifies the essence of his life and what he's brought to Ananda. This is a quote from the great naturalist John Muir. I live only to entice people to look at nature's loveliness. My own special self is nothing. I wish to be like a flake of glass through which light will pass. So thank you, Nayaswami Bharat, for the incredible contribution you've brought to Ananda these past 50 years, and for you yourself being a temple of God's light and showing us, giving us a creative template of sharing Master's teachings more joyfully and expansively throughout this world.
Thank you, Kshama, David, Sundara, for all that you shared. And good morning to you all. Buongiorno. Hola, privyet, namaskar. My name is Nayaswami Dharmarajan, and my wife Dharmini and I lead the center in Chennai, which is in South India. And we're very grateful to be here with you all today. It's really a joyful day. It's also, I think, as you all know, Sister Gyanamata's birthday, an added blessing to our anniversary here. Another aspect of Dwapara Yuga is, sorry? Okay. There's many aspects of Dwapara Yuga. The one actually I was thinking of was the bringing together of East and West. And the key phrase, the key word in that is bringing together. Not so much East and West, of course, what they have to offer one another, but in Dwapara Yuga we will see the world as one place, East and West all together. It's partly because in Dwapara Yuga you banish the illusion of space. And so we may even find ourselves on other planets. And so then what does it matter whether you're the east or the west of this one? Many planets to the east of us and many... So I wanted to share some of the things that we learned when presenting these teachings in India, that many of us who were in India sharing and still are, discovered about our own path. You could say some of the things that India taught us. I have to check that my little timer is going here. Good. One thing that I did early on in making this discovery, Haridas Ji and I were offering corporate workshops, and when we would do our sales pitch, we would be very careful in our language, because India's corporate culture is an international and inter-religious or non-religious corporate culture, and there's one word you can't mention, and you can guess what word that is: God. And so we were very carefully and presenting our what these workshops offer. My gosh, has it been off this whole time before now? Wow. You've been so polite. Okay. That may explain some of the facial expressions I was seeing too. I thought, is it that bad? Okay. All right. Well, so we were presenting our sales pitch for these corporate workshops in terms of stress management and in terms of more active energy production and output and so on, and how this meditation will center you and help you to be more creative in your problem solving and so on. And the man listened very politely, and at the end he said, but this is basically to raise the kundalini up the sushumna, yes? When we visited another, this was a international wireless network, cell phone provider. We went to visit them. We were supposed to see the director of HR, and when we went to see him, he said, no, the CEO wants to meet you. And we were dressed in business suits and ties, playing the part. We joked we were sheep in wolves' clothing. And we went to see the CEO, and when Haridas extended his hand, his sleeve slipped up and his bangle showed, and the CEO said, oh, I see you're wearing the astrological bangle. I don't know how many CEOs you've met, but this was the first and last one that I ever met that knew the bangle. I mean, what else was there to say? I mean, let's just chant Om. And So, in fact, it was difficult in the beginning for me to understand how could we present ourselves, because in America we could say, if someone asked us, what do you do? We could say, well, I do yoga. But in India, yoga was so common. So I do yoga too. So many people do yoga. It wasn't that we were trying to differentiate ourselves, but we were trying to explain what it was we were offering. It would sort of be like opening a restaurant, and they say, "What do you offer?" "Oh, we serve food." So we had to explain, well, a little more. So we could say, "Well, I meditate." Well, a lot of people meditate. Well, in America, I could say I have a guru, and usually I'd lost people by now. And in India, well, I have a guru too. So many people have gurus. And of course, this is becoming true in America and Europe as well. And then it was, well, we live in an ashram. Well, there are many ashrams in India. So how could we explain exactly what we were doing? And a marketing consultant who was working with us on our website just said very clearly, "Autobiography of a Yogi is your brand." He said, everybody knows that book. They may not have read the book, but their uncle has the book, or they've seen the book. They might not even know Yoganandaji's name, but they know Autobiography of a Yogi. So that is your brand. And so another person explained it. She said, "I wanted to learn the teachings from you all because you are the people. You are the people of the book." And so we knew then how to present ourselves, that we were children of Autobiography of a Yogi, of Paramahansa Yogananda, Swami Kriyananda. And so another thing you might then, that we learned from India was devotion. This was around the discipleship ceremony. In the discipleship ceremony, as I'm sure most of you are familiar, nearly all, it says to bring a flower. And so I and many like me reading this, and okay, very good, flower. And so to the discipleship ceremony, we brought a flower. Now, in India, it's a little different. It says the same thing, bring a flower, and yet people come in with so many flowers, and that's discipleship. For Kriya, forget about it. And why? Because how can my devotion be expressed by one flower? How can I, on the day that I'm making this lifetime commitment and connection with my guru, can I offer him one flower only? It's beautiful. And Jyotishji wrote about this in his blog, and others have talked about it. It really helped us. Why? Hold back. So it was a great education for us. You might ask then, well, why? What do they need us for if they have all of this going already? Well, what people have told us is a number of things. First, the technique. I know what I'm supposed to do, I know why I'm supposed to do it, but how? This is in fact what yoga is on the spiritual path. It's the how. And so many people have said, yes, we were told to meditate, but when we asked how, they said, you meditate. And so taking us through step by step, guiding us and so on is extremely helpful. Another thing people have shared is your own experience, that you all have been doing this for some time, and so it's helpful to connect with that, to be able to answer our questions, to be able to see the fruits of, okay, well, this seems to be working for you, maybe it will work for me. There was another thing, though, that was a little more subtle, which was that I heard that in one of our centers, somebody was giving a class and talking about the yamas and the niyamas, and everyone says, yes, nama, niyama, we know, but still, people were asking different questions. How can I practice this yama? How can I develop that niyama? And the teacher said, listen, you can focus on all that, and it's good, especially if it inspires you, but if not, just meditate. And if you meditate, you will automatically develop all of these qualities. And I thought that's a pretty convincing answer, and I think that's true. But then after the class, one of the friends of this teacher came up and said, is that really true, though? Because I was meditating for 10 years, and I was not developing in any of these qualities automatically. And, we're not our own best judge, of course, and all of that. But putting that aside, I had to think about that. And I remembered something that Swami Kriyananda had written in A New Dispensation, which is in the Handbook for Discipleship now. And he said, I have seen people coming to this path, coming to this way, meditating and growing spiritually out of all proportion to the time they have spent meditating. And he said, that is the grace of our gurus. That is the grace of Yoganandaji and this line of masters. That is the hidden, secret ingredient. Another time he described that grace as the good feeling people have after they leave Ananda. And so that was very immediate for me, because that I felt and feel all the time, and that's grace. Now, the thing that we learned most of all in India, though, was people's appreciation for Swami Kriyanandaji. There was a cameraman filming him, and many of you have seen those shows on YouTube, the Way to Awakening shows. And they were on a spiritual channel that had many spiritual teachers. And the cameraman filming was very quiet. It's good to be if you're a cameraman. But he, afterwards, he told one of our members, he said, I have filmed so many spiritual teachers, and I have seen them on camera and off camera. And he said, I have never seen anyone like Swami Kriyanandaji. And this was what people's experience was of Swamiji. They flocked to him. And another thing that we learned was how everyone would run and touch his feet. And it was with great devotion and great reverence and very sincere. We saw also a mother, prostrate herself, touch Swamiji's feet, take his blessing, and then stand up and then turn to her son and say, hey, take blessing. And we saw there was a practical side to it too, that look, get some vitamin C and study for your exam, take the blessing, it'll help. And so there was something else, though, that we encountered. This was a question often put to us when we would give classes in discipleship. We would train people and prepare them for discipleship to Yoganandaji and this line of gurus. And they were very open to Master. Some people recently were telling us, because Babaji is very well known in Chennai, and they would say, I've come to this path for Babaji. I saw the movie of Rajinikanth. I want Babaji. You all are Babaji people. I want Babaji. And it's wonderful. I want Babaji too. But we were wondering, how do we sort of, because, I'll just tell the story. So somebody, one of the people said, now as I'm taking discipleship and I'm meditating and I pray to Babaji, Yoganandaji's face appears. Why? And I thought, well, if they're working it out, then there's nothing we have to worry about. But another one explained it. He said, I felt before my devotion to Babaji, it was more abstract. It wasn't from my own experience. But through you all, I have experienced Yoganandaji. But the question people asked us over and over again was, you always bring up, how do we relate to the Guru when he's not in the body? And Swamiji's right there. And no matter how many times we tried to explain it, they kept asking the same question. Now, somebody put it a different way. When Swamiji was asked to dedicate a temple that was not only dedicated by him, but somehow it sounded like they were saying it was dedicated to him, he couldn't go to the dedication. This was in South India, and he had just arrived in Italy, having been in India. He said, I can't really come back. I have a whole program here. But why not Dharmadas and Nirmala go in my stead? And they replied, they wrote their reply that if we're sorry we can't have Kriyanandaji, but we will accept his disciples. And finally, again, this is how it's explained in India. Someone was asking the members of our center, someone was asking one of our center assistants, so the teachers here, they were all direct disciples of Yoganandaji. And he said, no, they're not direct disciples, but they're direct disciple of a direct disciple. So I just want to close on a personal note, thanking you all, thanking everyone here, and especially it's a joy to be in this Temple of Light, because this Temple of Light has been conceived of for about 50 years. We didn't have a space at Ananda Village that was built as a temple, certainly at the old retreat, but our temples had basically been buildings that had been built for another purpose and then turned into temples, and this building was built as a temple, and it didn't take us 50 years to figure out we needed that. It was that every time the money, the energy grew that might produce the temple, it went to spread the work. One time in particular, in 2003, energy was ramping up to build the temple. I think Swamiji may have broken ground then, or maybe it was at another time. And then he went to India. And so all energy, people, resources went to India. Daviji said, I think Ananda India is a gift of Master's children in the West to his children in the East. Not only, of course, in terms of money, energy, personnel, but also in Italy, they gave the greatest gift of all, Swamiji himself, because he was there for 7 years, and then he went to India. And so that is one reason why this celebration has been so late in coming, you could say. There was another reason why we had to wait, and that's because we weren't all here yet. And so it's a joy for us all to be celebrating together. And as many of us as have come 50 years ago or just coming in today, this is the first time we're doing this all together for everyone. And so it's so wonderful to be united in this spirit. So thank you, Master. Thank you, Swamiji. Thank you all. Happy anniversary.
I think Dharmarajan hit us with the perfect closing there. So I'll start us up again. My microphone karma wasn't quite as bad as his, though, so thanks for taking that one. I just got here about 48 hours ago. I was in the field at Ananda Farm on Kameno Island picking peas, where we have, I think, the most incredible pea patch I've ever personally seen this year. It needs to be picked about every 8 minutes. And you don't get finished picking in the next 8 minutes, so you can imagine what that feels like. But actually on the way down here on Tuesday, before that, our car broke down again as we were getting ready for the road trip when Haley was going to come down this weekend. And so she was postponed. So instead, I was able to drive down with her on Tuesday instead of flying down yesterday. And on the drive down, actually, we were able to sandwich Asha's new book about Swamiji with the talks on Tuesday morning about the history of the village and really how it began. And then as soon as that ended, I just started reading Asha's book again. And we had a good 12 or 14 hours of incredible satsang in the car. And I reflected afterwards that it was actually the most I had sat in still in probably 2 or 3 months, which was amazing. But what really struck me when I listened to what was being shared on Tuesday from Shivani especially, and from everyone who was recounting the early years here, was how much that was in us and how much that experience is so shared still. The simplicity of what they lived through to create this place. I heard the word tapasya getting used, and I can certainly understand that. When we started the farm on Kameno about 7 years ago, it was just Haley and I. I feel a little bit greedy because we actually lived in a house. But it was just Haley and I, part-time, trying to make it work, really, and not having any idea what we were doing. I have a degree in finance and came from a background in corporate finance. And Haley has a degree in philosophy. And when Master got a hold of us, we were actually living as basically hermits in the Sierra Mountains, and perfectly happy to do so. But we knew we had to come out of the mountains and Step by step, we got taken up to Ananda, Seattle, Ananda, Washington, and we knew we were supposed to farm and didn't know anything about what that meant. You can talk to Om Prakash if you want some funny stories about what it was like to talk to us when we came out of those mountains. But Master's grace was always there. And always we felt this kinship to Ananda Village. It was interesting because my first understanding of Ananda Village was as this spiritual village where all the people lived so simply, where they grew all their own food, and where it was a holistic model of life. As I tuned more into it, I realized that was my version of it. They had let go of some of these specific ideals a long time ago in the need to do what Master called them to do. But the kinship that I felt and that was germinating inside of me was to those first 10 years of Ananda Village and to how it began. And when I think about where we're at now in this temple, 50 years later, and when I listen to what the founders have been sharing with us, and very delicately talking to the next wave about the work that is still to be done, I see how we have to start at the beginning. That the work isn't for, how do I want to say this? How would Master say this? As we expand and we go out into the world to help everyone, as we are right to want to do, the real power in doing so comes from how we live our lives every single day. When we look around the world right now and what the real needs are in the world, Ananda Village, as a holistic model of life, is the example that everyone needs to know is possible. And what we've done since the beginning of that seed was have urban communities, have meditation centers. The work has expanded in infinite ways. But I read an interesting thing last night when I picked up the reflections after 30 years, and it was something Shivani wrote that Swami had stated, that Ananda Village was taking a lot of his energy because it was the first model to go forward. And I thought it was the seed. But once that model is in place, that's the model for the whole world everywhere. And once we know what the model looks like, because people are really living it and it's really there to see, I think for myself, I wouldn't have had no interest in Ananda as a church, as any kind of teaching center that has classes. The meaning that Ananda had to me was that I saw these people here really living this life together inside of themselves. And that's where the power comes from. So when I look out and I think, what's it gonna be like in 50 years? This occasion is colossal because, like Sundara tuned into, what we have is this convergence of all of these people who've given their lives to this moment, to this movement to happen. And in some ways, you can feel that torch. In 10 years, it's not going to be the same. This is a cosmic moment. I walked home last night after the concert, and I was up on the ridge with Haley, and we looked over, and just the tiniest sliver of that new moon was on the horizon. And you could feel the cosmicness of this occasion, of this new moon. While we celebrate where we've come from, we have the next 50 years to grow into ourselves as a whole new generation of Ananda. I'll tell a little bit of a personal story, which is that at the farm, many of you know the Lee family. And when Pien showed up at the farm a few years ago, she made a statement to me at one point that growing up, and as she did at the village, she had only really watched one movie her entire childhood. And that movie was The Sound of Music. Thank you, David. And I think so much about that movie because I had never even seen Sound of Music. And Pien pulled it out, and we watched it in the farmhouse. And about halfway through it, the thought came to me, this is the best movie I've ever seen. I didn't know a movie could be so good on so many levels. But there's a great scene in there where Maria goes back to the convent, or where it's when she's about to leave, I'm forgetting now, but she's talking to the mother of the convent, and she asks her, have you learned any lessons? And she said, oh yes, mother. I've learned to know the will of God and to do it. Now I'm paraphrasing that quote. If Pien's in here, she can shout it out for me. If you know Pien, she does not shout. I heard a whisper back there. But when I thought about that, and that's our real job, that's really, my topic is simplicity, and here I am talking about this. But to be truly simple, it's to be truly God-focused. Everything gets so confusing, so complicated when we look at things from outside in. All these separate parts, all these different people. Everything is so complicated. Swamiji said this is what's happening right now in Dwapara Yuga, a world that is getting increasingly complicated. But our superpower, our ability to be completely immune to that, is simplicity. So the high ideals, yes, this is why we're here. Realization, God, truth. But without being grounded in that essence of how this place started, true simplicity, needing nothing of this world, nothing, all of it's God, we don't have the power. So together we see simple living and high thinking are the formula of Ananda. It's the formula for all of us. And another thing that Maria says in The Sound of Music that I just absolutely love is, let's start at the very beginning. It's a very good place to start. So we're 7 years into Ananda Farm on Kameno Island, and I would like to invite this whole vast room of you to visit us sometime. When Devi Ji visited this spring, actually, and I've heard her say it before, she stated, and it thrilled my heart when she said it, that it reminded her of the village. It felt like the village at the beginning. And it was great confirmation for us because that's how we felt. That's what we've known to be true, but I can't just go around telling people that. I'm telling you that right now, so I guess I can. But there's an infinite potential to serve this world in the simplest ways. At our local farmers markets, in all the areas of life that are basic and fundamental to each one of us, we bring Ananda through vibration. It doesn't always have to come through a class or through standing on a stage. Those are important. But in every interaction we have, there's Ananda. So our ministry is at farmers markets. And it's wonderful. It's Ananda everywhere. And so I invite all of us just to remember that as we feel the essence of Ananda and really honor these last 50 years and where it came from, we have that opportunity to be extremely simple in ourselves, to not get pulled into the duality of this world anymore. And when we do, go right back to the source. Forget it. Ananda is in you, it's in me. So, Om Guru.
Good morning, great souls. Good morning. My name's Michelle Dossett, and I've been blessed to serve in Ananda, New England, mostly our Boston area meditation groups and center in southern Maine. And I've been asked to talk today about meditation and its role in health and medicine. And I suspect for most of you in this room, that is not a big leap to make that link. Many of you have heard Dr. Peter speak here before. Many of you, just by virtue of living in the times that we do, have read or heard in the news things about the health benefits of meditation. But it's important to realize that this is a decidedly modern phenomenon. The ancient rishis of India, the sages of other meditation traditions, talked about meditation principally as a way of deepening our spiritual life and communing with God. Any reference to the health benefits of meditation were secondary, if at all mentioned. But Master was a very practical yogi. He had to be when he came to the US in 1920. And he talked extensively about the health benefits of meditation, his yogoda or energization exercises, affirmations, and the other tools that he brought. And he taught meditation extensively during his spiritual campaigns crisscrossing this country. Nayaswami Jyotish said on Monday that he initiated 100,000 people into Kriya Yoga. Think how many more hundreds of thousands he taught the Hong Saw technique to. And in doing so, he really laid the foundation for the explosion of interest in meditation and its health benefits in this country that then really grew in the late 20th and now early 21st century. It's estimated that today, 14% of the US adult population has tried meditation at least once in the last year. That's up from 8.5% 5 years ago. That's huge. But many of the people who are coming to meditation today are not coming for spiritual growth. They're coming because they're looking for stress relief. They're looking to benefit their health. And we live in a world today where stress-related chronic diseases are epidemic, both in the developed world and increasingly in the developing world. And meditation and these related tools have the profound ability to reverse stress physiology in the body. And that's really something we've only begun to understand in the last 50 years or so on a scientific level. I've been working the last several years at the Benston Henry Institute for Mind-Body Medicine at Massachusetts General Hospital as a physician and researcher. And the founder of that institute, Dr. Herbert Benson, was one of the first physicians in the US to describe physiologically what happens to the body when we meditate, and to realize that the changes that take place are the opposite of the stress response. And today I see patients every week who come wanting to learn these techniques to benefit their physical and mental health and find peace of mind. And when I share with them that as little as 8 weeks of meditating for 20 minutes a day creates changes that we can see on MRI scans of the brain, that it changes the expression of over 1,500 different genes and cells of our immune system, that it decreases inflammation, that it slows cellular aging, they're amazed. They had no idea that these centuries-old techniques, which they think is just a new age fad, has such profound physiologic and neurobiologic effects and can benefit them so greatly. And now we have many randomized controlled trials, some of the highest level of scientific evidence, showing that these techniques can be helpful for a variety of different health conditions. Inflammatory bowel disease and other autoimmune conditions, irritable bowel syndrome, high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, a number of heart arrhythmias, chronic pain, cancer-related fatigue, anxiety, depression, and many others. And many of the patients I see who participate in an 8-week program we offer where we teach meditation and related techniques find that their lives are totally transformed as a result. And many times they find significant improvement, if not complete resolution of their symptoms. And often they're able to decrease doses of some of their medications. And I'd like to share a few stories briefly. I have a colleague who has been teaching this program with me to physicians and other healthcare professionals in our hospital. And about 2 months after finishing one of these programs, one of my colleagues came up to me and said, "Michelle, you cured my heartburn." She had been on omeprazole, and it had been such a bother, but now her symptoms were gone and she didn't need the medication anymore. I had a patient a couple years ago who was on medication for anxiety called alprazolam or Xanax, taking it 3 times a day, and she didn't want to be on it. And I taught her meditation in the clinic. She took our 8-week program. About a month and a half later, she had managed to wean herself off of all the medications. She was meditating 20 minutes twice a day. She had changed her mindset around her stressors, and she was a totally different person. I have another patient who I've been following for some time for her high blood pressure. She's an older woman. And she was on a low dose of some medication, and then she had a very significant stressor life event happen. And I worked with her over the course of a year on fine-tuning her skills. We added a second meditation to her day. And then I taught her pranayama that she could use as a mini relaxation throughout the day. And then I taught her a couple of affirmations, and she found that incredibly helpful. And she got through that year, and we didn't have to change her blood pressure medication and increase it. We kept it stable. Most recently, a few months ago, I saw a lovely 86-year-old woman who came to see me. She was having some memory problems, some sleep problems, and a lot of other health issues. And I taught her meditation. And she called me about 2 weeks after the appointment. She said, "Doctor, I don't get this meditation thing. I don't think I can do this." And I happened to recall that she identified as Irish Catholic. And so I said to her, "I want you to use Hail Mary, full of grace, as your mantra." She said, "Okay, I'll try that." She came back to see me a week later, and it was working for her. I taught her some diaphragmatic breathing. We did a couple other things, and I led her through a practice, basically incorporating all the tools that we had done together. And I ended with the meditation with an expansion phase, much as we do in Hong Sa, where I had her focus on an uplifting divine quality. And at the end of the meditation, she looked at me and she said, "Doctor, I have to ask you something." "Yes." "Were you ever a nun?" And being a yogi and wanting to be truthful, I paused and I said, "Well, in a former life." Meaning a past life, right? And she's like, "I knew it. I was onto you. This'll just be our little secret." And then she proceeded to tell me how growing up she'd been in a boarding school run by nuns and some very positive, powerful experiences she had in that time. And then she said to me, "Do you still live in a convent?" And realizing what I'd gotten myself into, but still wanting to be truthful, I said, "No, I live in an ashram." "What's that?" "It's the Indian version of a convent." But you see, she wasn't tuning into my past life as a nun or a monastic. She was tuning into a ray of consciousness that she had felt through our practice together. And because of her life experience, she identified that with a particular path. But she was able to get in touch with that ray once again, and that it reminded her of these very positive experiences that she had had. So I want to close with 2 thoughts on where is meditation in health and medicine going from here. We've seen this huge explosion. First, many physicians and other healthcare professionals are now starting to learn these tools. They're learning it to deal with the stress of their jobs and what they're facing. And what we're finding is that when healthcare professionals practice these tools, it not only improves their health, but it qualitatively changes how they relate to their patients. They are more present. They are more empathic. And I think this is going to lead to a revolution of caring in healthcare. And finally, Our healthcare system in the United States, as well as in many countries, but particularly here, is going bankrupt. We spend more than twice than any other industrialized nation per capita on healthcare. There is data now that when patients learn these tools, it reduces healthcare utilization, it reduces costs, and it improves outcomes. My great hope, and I think this will happen, is that we will see many more clinics like the one that I've been working in, where patients can be referred to learn these tools for their own health and well-being. And that will ultimately, by incorporating these tools into medical care, not as sort of the last-ditch effort or after they've had the $100,000 workup, as often happens when they see me, but as part of primary prevention, that will totally transform and improve the health of our population as a whole, and ultimately shift the consciousness on this planet. Namaste.
And we have a choice. We could rest my voice and go home. But if you want to stay, we'll keep going. So, so I have to start with something humorous that came to me, that there's a 50th anniversary, and this is going from the book, from Patanjali back to the book table. So sometimes what I do in this village is deal with the planning, and we just finished a master plan that took an inordinate amount of time, but we did it. Part of a planning process is you have to look at environmental impacts of all sorts. And one of those impacts is impacts on cultural resources or archaeological resources. And the threshold of concern, meaning if it's older than this number, you have to look at it. If it's older than 50 years, it counts as an archaeological thing that you have to examine. So that means in the future, when we're building houses and we're digging foundations, and we find things from early Ananda that were the Tamasic things that we were trying to get out of the way, we might have to consult an archaeologist. So our topic is communities. We've already spoken a lot about communities this week with Jyotish and Devi, and then Jaya, specifically talking about communities as a tool for self-realization, of taking a group of people, focusing their energy, taking that energy and values towards something. What's happening here at Ananda is bringing people together in the search for self-realization. It's a whole lot easier to do that when you're among like-minded people, when there's people that remind you that your happiness is not found in material things, that happiness comes from within, that you're not going to find fulfillment outside, when you have loving, kind, like-minded people to uplift your consciousness. It just makes it a whole lot easier, and that's what Ananda's been doing for a really long time. But there's another aspect to community. There's actually a couple more. Another one that Master and Swami talked about all the time was community as protection. We're moving from Kali Yuga to Dwapara Yuga, and there's an inevitable conflict. There's an inevitable clash of cultures, and there's going to be inevitably things that aren't so nice to live through. And Swami and Master always urge people, band together, get land in the country, be able to grow food, prepare for hard times. And one of those ways to do that was by forming communities. And the road ahead, Swami wrote in the 70s, and then for every decade of his life past that, he was always telling us, be prepared, be prepared. And a community is a really good way to do that. But what I really want to focus on more is another aspect of community that speaks more to what we're talking about today, and that's communities as a harbinger for a new age, as for Dwapara Yuga. And it's not necessarily for Kriya yogis, it's not necessarily for people who understand the process of self-realization, but there's an awful lot of people in this world who are looking for something, who understand that there's something that's been lost, the connection. We live in a time that's the most atomized, fragmented, individualistic time in history. And there are many, many, many communities that have broken apart as this clash of Kali Yuga comes into Dwapara Yuga. I'll talk a little bit more about why that is, but it's important that as we're moving forward into this, that we look at the possibilities that communities can bring. And this is what Master talked about. This is what Swami wrote about specifically in his book, Hope for a Better World. He was saying that all these philosophies that we have, these mass movements, these things from Kali Yuga, this competition, this greed, this materialism, he says the antidote, that what we really need to change is just the way people relate to each other. We need to get back to consciousness. Not necessarily self-realization, but we need to think about how we relate to each other. And for many, 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 many years, for decades, centuries, people lived in communities. And they would have a community, a religious community, a community of village, a community of small businesses, a community of a neighborhood. And all that's being broken apart these days. And so what does that mean? Should we just go back to the way we were? And no, not really, because there's something happening. We're at a change of an age. We're at a change where we have to break up those old forms and bring in a sense of energy and consciousness to that. So when I first got interested in communities, I had the good fortune of serving on a project in Ladakh, India, a sustainable development project. Ladakh is a Tibetan Buddhist part of India. It was in a culture that had been left alone for a long time. They didn't really have any resources. They're up in a desert at 10,000 feet, and they had a very beautiful traditional culture that was still intact there. And that got me interested in communities. Wow, these people, they like each other. They work together. They cooperate. There's, ideals behind what we do. There's this Buddhist culture in there. Yet, then I started, thinking about that. Should we just all start living like Ladakhis? And as I read Swami Kriyananda's work on religion in the New Age and Dwapara Yuga, I realized that that's not going to happen. It's not going to be going back to those previous models. I mean, you can also find many examples where the village life was filled with bigotry and hatred and the caste system and economic oppression. And, it wasn't such a good tradition. Ladakh was very lucky. But the problem is, it was tradition, it was form, it was something that was stuck in Kali Yuga. We do it this way because that's the way we do it. That's the way our fathers have done it. That's the way we've always done it. And what we really need to look for is new ways of doing it that can break the inertia of this mass culture, this mass consciousness that we have of greed, materialism, of competition. And Swami says in his book, the way to do that is to get a number of people together, a small group of people together who can do something different. He said the mass of society, the inertia, or that mass of the structures we have is just held together by its own inertia. What we really need to bring in is some new ideas, some new energy, and like a spring thaw, it will thaw the ice, break it into flows, and then that river of consciousness can carry it away. So this is what communities can do in small places with a small few people. They can get together and they can create something that shows there is a different way to live. This is what Swami was doing, not just self-realization, but he's saying, come see us. People can live in harmony. People can live in cooperation. People can live in a non-competitive way. People can be kind to each other. It is possible. We can do that. And so many people come to Ananda who are not necessarily interested in Kriya Yoga or self-realization, and they ask us, okay, how do you do it? What are your secrets? How do you do community? And we tell them a lot of our principles, which are very important, but a lot of times, the principles of people, of giving responsibility, of treating the individual with respect, of looking at souls of people rather than individuals and bodies, of trying to give people individual responsibility, of trying to keep people inspired, trying to get everyone having their piece and owning this, of individual responsibility, of energy, willpower, all the things we've been talking about. But they tend to be fixated on form, and they want to know, what's the form? I mean, how do you do this? How do you do housing? How do you do this? And we have to tell them, well, we can tell you how our forms have evolved, but this is Kali Yuga moving to Dwapara Yuga. Those forms are going to be broken. It is hard to keep your forms unshaken amidst the clash of breaking egos. And those forms, Master had World Brotherhood colonies. He had forms in Encinitas. Did it work? No, it was there for a while. It didn't perpetuate itself. We had forms here in the early days that happened in Ananda Village. We had different forms when we went to the cities. We have other forms in the future because form is rooted in materialism, and that material world is breaking apart. It is never going to be fixed. It is going to change. What we're looking for is that flow, that energy, those principles. Look at Swami Kriyananda. Was it easy forming communities? No. Foreclosure, bankruptcy, betrayal, lawsuits, wildfires. What are we looking at in our communities now? We have real estate prices, we have currency exchange, we have economic forces, we have aging populations, we have aging buildings, we have, it's just not going to stay put. Does that mean we're not doing a good job? That we're not moving forward we should? No. Because what has happened is 50 years, or really 70 years, since Master's Garden Party talk was 70 years ago this month, at the end of July. For those 70 years, we're creating a flow. That energy is starting to move for community. And the form is secondary. We have to get off the Kali Yuga sense of form. It's that energy of community, of cooperation, of kindness, of uplifted consciousness, of people coming together to create that uplifted consciousness. It is not about the form. So the forms are going to go. The forms are going to be gone. Swami Kriyananda said, at one point he said, Ananda, it'll exist for a while as long as it's useful, and then it'll cease to exist. And does that matter? No, because the only reality is really God. But does that also mean that it's time that we just let it go or rest on our laurels of 50 years and, oh yeah, community, and you give them the book and this is how you do it? And, no, that's not going to work. Master said at that garden party, he said, my spoken word is registered in the ether, in the Spirit of God, and it shall move the West. Well, we've just begun in that movement, and we're just keeping it going, and it is going to take many, many different forms. All of us are going to give it a slightly different form, but it's coming together, showing what can be done, both on the lower levels and on the highest level of self-realization. But it's our mission to keep that energy, keep that flow going. Once there's a flow of energy, it has its own intelligence. It'll have its own magnetism. And that's what this first 50 years has been about, is creating that flow, that magnetism of community, and it's going to move the West. So let's close now, doing a visualization. See this temple, all of us in here, a beacon of light, little points of light that have come together, that are channels for these great avatars, this great movement of changing of consciousness on this planet. And from this temple, see that light spreading out as we go back to our homes, to our areas of service, as each of our points of light touch many other points of light, and let those lights begin to shine brightly. And see that light continuing to spread, point to point to point, always connected back to the source of God's grace, brought through these great avatars, coming through us, getting the ego out of the way, in clear, open channels, changing the consciousness of this planet. Let's rub our hands together.